Alright, I'm gonna update the drawing for the architect with the new locations. And we show about 29.5 feet from inside face of concrete to inside face of concrete on the drawing, but it's more like 28 foot 8 inches in real life now. And so the concern was, if we're moving these too far, you know, this span as per the drawing versus this span as per the drawing versus this span as per the drawing, we're within a few inches of each other, and this one obviously dramatically shorter. But since the overall area is shorter, and I'm going to go for an equal span from here to there and from here to there, the longest span from there to there, I think, when we get all done, because this one's going over this way and this one's going to move toward us. But I think overall we're going to be okay, and I'm going to have that for sure before we pour the floor and lock these in. It would still be a bummer if I had to set this all up and move these up and down again, so we're going to do some checking as much as possible. So I'm thinking about it right now at least. I'm at 7 foot 6 inches exactly to the wall right now, which is right there, right? Center line. And I'm extremely plumb. You probably watched me. So I played around with the thought of bolting it at 7.5 feet exactly, bolted to the beam. Then you're never moving at the top, and it's just a matter of kicking the bottom around. That's running out to get bolts and setting up to drill and that stuff today, which I could do another day if I didn't need to do it for this. So I just tested to see, and indeed, I don't know how handy it is for you to look at, but we're in really good shape in terms of plumb, although I could beat the bottom over to the right a little bit. And in this direction, we look pretty darn good again. And so I may do that, hit the bottom over. Oh, and the last thing was the elevation. I want to gain here, so I wanted to crank. This is the problem though. See, I want to crank with a wrench this thing out tight before I take any pressure off, because obviously we've gone a touch higher than it was extended out to before to make it loose, and so we want to make as many gains there as possible. When you start turning this thing though, it starts walking the foot all around the floor and we get into trouble. So it's a blend of making all that stuff happen without losing gains that you made a moment ago. But I'm now, if you go to the steel beam for this elevation check right along, you can make the steel beam real nice and level. But there's a lot of variation between the top of the steel, how much the plate squeezes right here, how many or how few joists there are in the condition of the wood. Even though the subfloor should be about the same thickness, we really want the subfloor as level as possible. So I've been going to the bottom of the subfloor to make this check, and we're at 44.5 right here. You may have to take my word for it. 44.5. I'm looking for that here, but I also want to check on the other end to see if I'm chasing myself up or downhill by making it something that I can't actually reach once I get down there. So if we're going for 44.5, that's where we are here, and now we're at 44 there, so we need a 1/2 inch on that post. This one I think is actually pretty close again. If we're going round about there, we're at 44, and if anything it's a little heavy, so we should have an easy time there, knock on wood. And again here, 44.5 practically. And so that's the most important thing to me. And it's this one here that really needs to get cranked on, which is going to be the next one we set up and work on. But for now I'm going to touch up the plumb quality here, and then take the weight off and reset this tower of power next to that bad boy and see if we can't get this far over there. But again, we got to gain a 1/2 inch, so I may end up, I'll probably plan it so that I have enough steel plate. I have another one here. I'll put another one and set this up so this setup can be over to one side more and leave room over here for a steel plate and a hydraulic jack. Because the other shores, my other heavy shores, are tied up being used in my basement. The other light duty shores are beginning to tear out a little bit here, and it's asking kind of too much of them here, so we're using the one that hasn't torn yet and being super careful not to do it to it. But anyway, we'll get a hydraulic jack up there if we need it, and we're gonna, god damn it, lift this thing up to where the subfloor is level and commit the post to a new location, and then jot these new post locations on a little scrap of paper so I can start a as-built drawing reference for the architect, which will have our holes, our window holes, openings in the right locations. It'll have greater detail in terms of how we solved this chimney base with a block. We'll be cutting this pilaster back, so we'll show that. The post locations will be accurate as well, and then we can get that through to the town building department, because they're getting kind of nervous with all the things that I say I've bounced off the architect, and I have, but that they haven't seen updated on a drawing, and they don't want to wait until as-built because they want to see problems that I might be able to fix. Speaking of which, I went to a lot of trouble here to select the location for this plumbing center line so that the end of it could be a toilet flange, and so that next to the finished wall we had room enough by code for the toilet. We need to have 15 inches from the center line of the toilet. Well, we've got 18 on the center line. In fact, we've got a little bit less. We've got like 17 3/4 because this has been moved in the stone. But if we need to put 1 1/4 on the wall before we frame a 2x4 wall instead of a 1/2 inch, obviously we gain 3/4 of an inch. And so we got 1 1/4, and 3.5 is 4.5, 4 3/4, and then we have a 1/2 inch sheet on the wall, so it's a 5 1/4 thick wall, which obviously goes right on by our stack that's in it, which is good. But at 5 1/4, then we need 15 inches to the center line, and we're nowhere near that. And so now I have to think about whether or not I need to excavate this and try to find a place to put a 45 in to come over and move the toilet flange over. Not too far, because then that forces the center line of the sink, and if our wall is going to have this post in it here, we need to have room enough for a sink and the toilet. And so I just need to kick it over a little bit, and we won't disturb the rest of it. We'll just excavate a little bit by hand probably and end up gluing in a 45 somewhere. Not the end of the world, but I want to know what I'm going to do and make one quick change, so we're holding off on that. Not to mention we've got other stuff we've got to do here. And the PECs, they want to see a plan for the layout of the PECs, and that's kind of based on going farther and knowing how many zone valves and what the conditions of the home are, and actually having it engineered, which we might get stuck on, because if that turns into too much of a project or too much cost, we're not going to do it, because we're not planning on hooking the PECs up right now. But the town says if there is going to be PECs in this floor and they're going to okay it, they want it engineered and designed first. So we're on the case with that. Hopefully that doesn't add up too much. But let's lock up that first post and get on to the second one. I just want to take a minute here to point something out, because I'm sure it seems to almost everybody like, you know, it makes so much sense to reuse this lumber and cut it into some cribbing quickly, because frankly all you're looking to be able to do is have it to be the same thickness and stack it up together and push against it. But there's more than that going on. If you notice, Sean, when he was here, all of his cribbing blocks are exactly the same length. And once he gets started with a nice square on the floor, he can send the outside corners flush with one another. And whenever so long as you're doing that, you can be sure that you're practically building straight up and down within a very tight tolerance, well within what you need. This here, with all of the overlap, etc., and you get started on the floor kind of where you want to be, and you get to the top, and now it's hard to see with the camera, but the load is going to be more over the left-hand side than the right here going down, and we've got all these other miscellaneous things. I don't have an odd number of 6x6, so I either leave one out entirely for the sake of being able to do a row of 3, or the only solid sort of layer that I can do is in this material, which is the old material, and it turns into a catastrophe, basically. It turns into way more messing around than you really want to have to do. Ideally, you'd go out and buy enough and make all the same lengths. You know, 2-foot lengths are a real nice place to start. Sean's are quite a lot larger, but he's doing like quite a lot larger setups with them. But these being all different sort of close enough lengths and sort of close enough thicknesses. Now the thickness of these versus the thickness of the 6x6 is different enough. Whereas if I were to slide this, in fact I had one in here, it's shy by 3/8 of an inch or so, and then you can get that much deflection and stuff, and it just turns into more variables, more loose ends, and there's a lot of weight here, and I'm sure that everything would be fine. But if this video series helps one person do something like this kind of under their own power by themselves with minimal investment, I can tell you right now, make all your cribbing blocks out of the exact same thing, make it fresh, new, juicy timber so that you can count on it, and make it all exactly the same and make that investment. This setup here is just a living nightmare to deal with, and it's making me really angry. But we're this high now, so I'm going to try to make the best of it and get that post moved over and that area of the beam lifted up. One more thing I guess I forgot to say is that you notice I stack it up the one time here, but in moving the stack over to here, I take off the top and I place it on the floor. And thereby it ends up kind of reverse, stacked upside down, and then when we move over here I want to do the same thing. I don't want to take this all the way down to the floor, throwing stuff around on the ground, or stacking it all up in an interim stack, only to restack it all over here and stack and unstack it, or collect it all up from the ground by bending over to the floor and picking it all back up again, and messing up all of the stone. So you want to be able to stack it up, unstack it while stacking it again, unstack it while stacking it again, and that's a big component here of why it's way better to make everything a uniform piece, because it's in the restacking and unstacking and turning it upside down and putting it right back up again that you end up running into head scratching problems that slow you down. And here I am dealing with them, as like I'm saying, rather than just staying busy. That's sort of the whole thing. Okay, we have reached an impasse. We went to 44.5 over here, and I tightened up that post as best I could, but we still only are holding at 44 and maybe 3/8, not really. 5/16 more like. Over here, above this big post, we're already, I have to be careful because there's a piece of subfloor missing, so I got to make sure that I'm actually in fact on the bottom surface, because it's just out of sight right there, and that can get you into a lot of trouble. But we're at 44 and 5/8 easily. Over here we're back to 44.5, I believe. I'm gonna need to have it out on the tape for us to be able to read that, but yeah, we're back to 44.5. The problem is that I can go, I'm at 44 and 5/16 again here, but where the post is, I'm just at 44 and 1/8. Now let's stay on that same subfloor board, you know, practically, or the adjacent subfloor board, and just one bay away, we're twice, well, we're over 1/4 of an inch rather than 1/8. So we're seeing more movement just here than we are there, which means the whole thing really needs to be closer. Now, I couldn't be there when I set up because that was where the post was. That's all the farther that way I could be. And I've installed this short tight, and that's still, it's practically tight. But I need to sag, I need to let this all the way down, take the jack all the way down, take this stack completely down and move it over just about 1 foot, and see if I can't lift there and get this thing to go up this far and then some right here to tighten up this post. All to get that last 1/2 of an inch, which, believe me, is still worth it, especially the more time we spend right here cranking on it, but it just sucks. Let's take everything down and move over. Well, believe it or not, there's still plenty of tension on this, but now this plate is just spinning with that knuckle, so nothing's getting any shorter, and it's just going around and around. I have quick grips, but my shortest quick grip won't fit in here. It just goes in when it's open, but when you pull the jaw down to tighten, it becomes overall too long and gets jammed right there. So I maybe should have a few C-clamps the way that Sean's got, and I'll see if I can't get some that can be tightened and loosened with a socket, so I could throw it on the impact gun or something like that and zip it together and unzip it rather than trying to hand tighten. So I'll see what's at the supplier. I gotta get something to drink, and see if I can't get that plate locked to the beam, the tension taken off of this, the whole thing dismantled, moved over, reassembled to this point, cranked back up again, and then some right there. And I should get a hydraulic jack too, because I don't have one with me. So we'll get the hydraulic jack and some C-clamps, something to kick our blood sugar up a notch, and then we'll come back and see if we can't throw down on this mammer jammer. Okay, I knew there was a reason that I don't often reach for these bottle jacks. I was fortunate enough to be given them. I think my dad gave them to me. The Cobalt brand also is a turnoff, but I see now that I've got a bunch of tension on that it's essentially shot. I think the one was leaking its fluid out. I mean, it's just at the bottom of the stroke that I get a little power, if anything. I'm fairly certain, like I said, that it's basically shot. It's a 20-ton jack, which is a good-sized jack. I've got another 20-ton jack. I guess I didn't even bring it in from the car. It's even shorter with even less throw. So I might go grab that really quickly. It's down to the last half an hour of the day. 20 minutes away at the Tractor Supply I'd never go to unless they were the only ones that had what I wanted. They have a 50-ton jack. I looked at their 30-ton jack too. It's like a difference of 130 to 180, so it's $50 more. But sometimes you just want, I mean, for this overall size and weight of the unit, I may make one last check at the store itself. I was initially going to go to the 30-ton brand new, but I see that 50-ton, and I kind of just want to be able to put English on it next time I reach for that jack. And the thing is, I own my place, and my place is enormous and heavy. It's 3 stories. It's more heavily constructed. The spans are greater. Everything about it is bigger. And so if I can't get some value out of something I buy for working for others at home, which I'm sure I'd get some value out of the 30-ton jack. So we'll see. It's between the 30 or the 50. But I guess I'll pop this guy out and throw the little shorty in there. I can add a couple layers of LVL and see if indeed it's just that this 20-ton jack is shot. And maybe even that little 20 will get us through this issue. I guess I'm jumping the gun here. So we'll throw him in there and see. But if not, we'll pull the plug on the day and start tomorrow by buying one of those bigger, heavier jacks. And then, you know, each of those lifting rams that Sean was using in here was slung across just a couple of those like 50 some inch long cribbing blocks, 54s or whatever. He didn't bat an eye. I didn't, nothing was creaking or breaking. So if anything, this is a more robust, because I think his are, I want to say maybe they're 6x8s. No, maybe they are 6x8s. But we more than make up for that with such a short little stack up here. It ought to bear plenty of weight. It's going to be in the guts, the cojones that we've got for lifting. So let me get the little guy and put him in there, see if we make a ton of headway here. And I won't bother buying something new right now. But if not, that's what we'll do. All right, believe it or not, I just think we're asking too much of that 20-ton jack. That's 40,000 pounds. And this heavy, sure, isn't the heaviest that I own, but it's STL 13HD, good for 53,000 pounds. Yeah. So, or 52,000 pounds. I think we need to go to at least 30 ton, which is 60,000 pounds. And then, like I say, at that point, why not get the 50? Because I ought to have all the power that I need. And if I get sick of dragging his heavy butt around and I want to go down in weight and risk having a little less power, I can jump to the 30 someday. But we'll probably go out and snag that 50. It's getting to be hard to pull the handle down, and I think that we wasted that other bottle jack. Where is it? We smoked that in my basement, me getting just frustrated with having all this invested time and energy and being right there ready to go the last little, because it's an infinitesimal, it's a tiny little bit that we want. But I want it, and I will have it one way or another. And we've got 4 solid columns of wood loaded onto concrete piers and stone here. We've got what is that? Just out of curiosity. Looks like 16 inches of solid wood, 14 and a half. Plus a 1/2 inch steel plate. We're going up. We're going to go up here. So tomorrow I'll start with getting myself a new jack, and I'll leave everything just right here for tonight probably. This, you may be wondering why I continue to try and see the laser line around the corner from this, because this I preemptively set up so that this plane is coming right down the center of this glue lamb, right between the pairs of double layers, right down the middle seam from end of, one end to the other, so I know that the line on the ground is right up the center line of where exactly I want to place the foot of this post when I get there. And I just was able to get that kind of easily, so I've resisted the urge to drag it around to where I can actually check over there, which will be the last thing that I do, and then we'll reset this location here. If you're thinking ahead of me, that's what I'm doing there. But I'm not even going to move a single thing here. I'm going to pack up the laser in the box and set it upstairs inside, so it's one more step that somebody's got to go to steal from me anything of serious value. And then we'll come back and take a real stab at this now that we've exhausted all of our, existing resources and we've come to the end of the day. Okay. I had to set some other stuff in motion, make some calls. We got to start catching up these drawings with what at least we know we've done here so that the town is more comfortable, because I've been playing this thing more by ear. Oh, let's see now. But basically we are not asking anymore. And I've got another question. That's interesting. Why I had attributed that moisture to that pile of stone. But that is not what is going on. We've got some kind of failure here that I'm not seeing anywhere else. All nice and dry, just the way you like it. So it must simply be, now that is a major failure area on the right hand side. I was looking for the stairwell. Used to be major failure there. We had major failure here as well, but it was more contained. Just as much failure, just less apparent when we started this project. And I think it has a lot to do with the amount of water that likely cascades directly off of that roof, directly over that gutter. It's cored up. Normally I'd say this exposed stone was another clear indicator, but this was here from having tried to put the last little bit of stone that we needed into this window. But I can see that it's all cut down as well. And I expect that it's just a bunch of water focused right here that would sooner come in than flow out and under through the stone over to the sump crock. And we've had rain a few times now, and that moisture's been there for a while, as I was thinking, wow, this has been so humid that it just won't dry out. But no, it's being supplemented by rainfall to an extreme degree. We've got the same thing going on there. And I'm not seeing anything in this sump crock. So, it's all very interesting. It's all very interesting. Because, of course, we want the water to go away. Now, I think above everything else, the square footage of your roof needs to be plumbed, as we have done almost completely, but not quite, because we haven't connected, well away from the structure. And that makes a good indication of this. Focusing all of that, as we said, rolling it up into a theoretical clay snake, that volume of 1 inch thick layer on the entire roof system. And rolling it up and focusing it here. just pushes it out at the rate over the timeline that we're talking, over such a fast timeline, it's going to end up coming up into the area like that. Everything else falling out here equally and migrating down and rising up into that foundation drain is a different story. But dumping it right outside on the ground, which is my worry with the rain barrel here. And as you can see, you don't get anything through the wall. At the very least, it's right at the bottom edge of where the waterproofing membrane sits on the footer that the water is actually coming through. And don't forget, we'll be under foam here and end capped with foam. And the floor will be against that. And whether or not the water moves down and gets into the drain inside or outside, or inside, which is what it's doing here, that will eventually move around the inside drain and into the sump crock, which it's very likely such a small amount that you're not going to see it able to get all the way over there. And in this case, it'll air dry away here, but in the future, it'll be pulled down slowly by gravity, consolidated slowly, either straight down or into that drain due to the level being just there, and come over here and get pumped out. Same there. So it's just something you want to remember that's going on all the time. And it's a portion of the reason why you'll be running the dehumidifiers in any finished basement, or any basement really, you'd be better off, because not only have you got an elevation below and far nearer to the water table around you or anything else, but the coolness here will pull and condense that moisture out of humid air in the summertime, or whenever you've got humidity, which is often in the summertime. So it's all going to be for a very good reason that we've got these systems in place. And it's a little disturbing to look right at it, but again, we're obligated to run a drain around the inside of this footer through this stone, and the whole thing is permeable entirely. And our overall level is managed in the sump crock being deeper than everything. As soon as it level starts coming up into the crock and we set our level switch or a float switch, it'll kick on and pull that level down by puking it out on the ground until the float switch turns us back off again. So we're just watching. It'd be nice to see nothing in here through all of this rain. I can tell you, if and when we get the downspouts into the downspout, we get the gutters cleaned and the downspouts tied into our new downspout loop, you wouldn't probably see this ever again. But it probably won't be until after we're done pouring the floor in here, where that won't be anything that you could see anymore, so it'll be too bad. I'd love things to work out to where it made sense for me to pivot and get the gutters cleaned and tie in the downspouts. There's a chance it would make sense for Ed to do the gutter cleaning with the tow behind man lift, which is the plan. So maybe we'll get on that. That'd be interesting. This is the area up here that we'd need to use the man lift primarily. This is across the front as well. These areas over here are a little shorter. He was talking about using the ladder. I don't like the idea of him doing that at all. So maybe we'll put him in the lift for the whole time. But if he gets that gutter cleaned out and that dries up and we get some more rain like we've had and we don't see moisture there, we can be sure that, that was the major culprit, which I'm fairly certain it is. And that area over there is another one. Right, it's actually the next. Our first connection is here. This gutter's meant to go down across through the windows and drop into this and go out. And then over here is our next vertical. I think he's right there. Yeah, that we're not connected to. And so that water is poured out here on the ground and migrated over into this area. So anyway, I wanted to address that. That's my best guess as of right now. And so I had anticipated saying many minutes ago, that we're not asking anymore. We're going to go up that last half of an inch. Got ourselves a 50-ton jack, just a touch over $200 with tax. And let's break him out and get some pushing done. Get done with that. Get this stuff out of the way and get down to cutting that concrete pilaster back. Okay, I put a little English on the lolly column, made sure that I've run it out almost as far as I'm comfortable reefing on the wrench in this kind of thin-walled tube. What is that? I don't know, like 1/16 of an inch roughly. We had to flatten it a little bit to put a little, be able to get the wrench handle into it. But we're looking for 44.5, which is, we're real close here. I know I talked about moving the laser, but I'm feeling pretty all right about that. Over here in front on this side where we can get to it, you know, we're over 44.5. So the other thing was that it was out of plumb, and so I've beaten it into very close to plumb. But all of that helps because we're taking something that's already a certain length and shoving it up as a hypotenuse, turning it into the vertical part of a right-hand triangle, which ends up meaning we're packing it into a distance that's a little shorter. So in straightening it out, we've pushed up, or at least taken some of the minute gaps or whatever are in there. See, there's all this different gap and, crunchiness. Various sticks here may leave. I guess we're not really leaving. Like you get real close there, you see that we've pressed in from this upper block into the lower. So that collateral syndrome here may have been point loaded because that was the high point of that surface. And in driving that down to level, it may equalize, whatever. There's a ton of that going on in this wood stack up. This piece of steel tube and the threads coming out the end of it, the fitment of the plate against the concrete has a little bit of gappage, and the fitment of this plate to the I-beam has a little bit of gappage. But overall, the concrete isn't going to compress because that's its strength. That upper plate may squeeze some here. And so again, we've done everything that we can to kind of overdrive it to where I'm comfortable with its current height, and now I want to snug that up as much as possible, and then carefully take him out because I can't leave him. I can't take all the pressure off over here, or I'll have way too much loading this, and it'll be stressed out and difficult to turn, and I could potentially damage it. So we'll get him out, and then we'll get the bottle jack out, and we'll see if we don't lose more than 1/4 of an inch. I'd really like to keep it to like 1/8, 3/16, if I had it my way. All right, once again, for this laser line, the bottom of the subfloor, which is the most important thing, we're over 44.5 here at the end of the beam. We're at 44 and 9, well, no, 44 and 5/8. Right here, where are you, baby? We're at 44 and 3/8. In the middle, I think we're still at the lowest point at 44 and 3/8, 5/16. Over here, we're at 44 and a half. Over here, gotta pull the tape out again. We're at 44 and 3/4. Over here, the other side of the stairwell, not in the addition, we're at 44 and a heavy 3/4. Right here, on the side of the stairwell that I thought had a belly in it, at this point, where's that laser, baby? Give me with that laser, baby. Here, they're right in the way, that post is right in the way. So if we come down here, maybe there it is. We're at 44. That's sort of this side. We're at 44 and 5/16. Right here on this post, we're pretty high still, which is good. We're at 44 and 3/4 again, so we want to come down. That's going to bring this area, we're going to move the post obviously over there, but this last little stretch is going to come downhill with all that because it's gathered in there. And right now we were sort of on a level because we're at, let's say, from one end of the tube, just out of curiosity. I think we looked at this already a few episodes ago. 39.5. And over here, without even the fitting in taken into account, we're at 39.75. So we're up a little bit over here already. Over here, which is on the other side of the fitting, because none of this is glued, and so I want to just be careful about looseness is contributing. So 39.75. So we're going downhill a little bit already, but it'll only help to come down a little bit more here on that leg, which I was careful about drilling those out because I knew that we were going to change this exact geometry right here, and I needed it to still go downhill. One of the other degrees of freedom that I have here is it's only in 1, 2, 3, whatever you want to call that, joists or groups of joists. It's completely clear here, and I have the ability to add, see, that's a street 90. That's a street 90 down into that fitting. I have the ability to replace it with a regular 90 and add a short piece of pipe there and take the end of this whole situation up. And as we talked about, if it gets too high where this ties in, well, then I have the ability to, I think I might still have to, or at least have the ability to cut those floorboards out of the way and slide the hub end of that elbow up in there. So that's flexibility that I've got in my plumbing, and it's all not, none of it's glued. So long story short, I'm content with that post. It's going to be near as makes no difference. It's, the difference of a 1/4 inch over its entirety. If we have a wall segment in here from there to there, or from there all the way over to make 2 major rooms here, like it used to be sort of, with the walkway here next to the stairs, over the course of that wall, the studs won't vary more than 1/8, 3/16 of an inch overall in length, and all of that's something that is well within tolerances here. I could spend more time with everything that we've got set up and make it absolutely perfect, but I think right now is when we call it, for efficiency's sake, and just call it quits now, because I can get through the rest of this and get started, maybe set up to cut on that concrete today, which is more important. And yes, that's in the scheme of things. The fact is, we are placing the posts today, or with this work more than anything, because they will be encapsulated by the concrete floor forevermore. If we still feel that we need to lift a little bit, we can set something like this up on that concrete near as we can get to the pier itself, and it's what we'll have to do at these 2 ends, because we're not going to have the mason here to put the concrete block pieces in to replace that wood until the floor is done. But that'll be we'll push up with this jack just enough to sneak that stuff out and slide a cut block in with some mortar in it. We'll do that against the footer with the floor in between and the styrofoam in between. We'll do it down there also, and it's just a matter of spreading that out enough when you're doing it, because of course that styrofoam's in there. I want to remember that. And so then you can add, if you can't thread it out, if that's fully covered, you can add a shim, like steel shim, underneath the beam on top of that post if you got a real problem, if we're this close and you really need it perfect, which I don't think is going to be the case. So now we just got to reset that stack of cribbing. Probably, so it looks like on this side of this post, so we have the room to go that way with it when it becomes time. And then we'll get that where it belongs and load it and get the elevation right. Alright, so over here I wanted to put the center line on the floor where this post needs to be. So I've got the plane laser coming through the 2 layers of LVL all the way and down the center line of that post. Oops, I'm standing in the middle of it. There it is. So that's where we want to be on the floor, as well as on the beam above, right? So the problem I have is that I need to shorten this a little bit, even though it's loose up there. I can't even very carefully keep it vertical and slide it because the floor changes just a little bit. I gotta back that off, and that takes like a 3/8 steel rod, so I'm gonna have to go see. I forget what we used before. I want to say it was one of the rods that were part of the old blue Kerjiggers. Anyway, I gotta find those, shorten it a little bit, take it over there, run it out and snug it up and tap it around so that we're on that laser line. But then we've got to come down in this area. So that's a good question. I guess I could, boy, that's hard to say. It's kind of a 2-man job, hold her steady, whatever. So see if I can't do it by myself. All right, I grabbed those C-clamps and stuck that right on the center line at the top that I want. Now it's in the way of getting all the way down there, but first I was content with the laser between here and there. Now I can see that right along here, it's just where I wanted things to be. We're loose, you know, and so if anything, we want to be over some. But so I'll go to the laser and then I'll check it with the plumb itself for the final inspection. But at this point, I'm going to take a little more. I haven't taken almost anything out. Maybe I've taken an 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch out of it. I'm going to take another. I don't want to have to lift. So I guess I'll put this. I'll just snug this up. Sorry, you're not in the 3. You're not in the Joby. Put you in the Joby. So we'll snug this up. Maybe we'll spin this up a little bit. See, we hit, we turn. There's so much. All the accuracy is in the way that this foot fits on the floor, and see, it jiggles. All of that. So I'm basically just gonna line us up here. Probably want to bridge. If anything, I'd like to bridge the seam between the concrete. You want to cross it with the foot like that. Shave the head of my hammer back a little bit, and then put us like that, sort of. And then let the jack down so that we've got pressure on the post only. Post Maloney. It's pretty close to fully loaded. Kirby or Herbie fully loaded. What is that? Okay, back to the horizontal plane laser. And locate the tape measure. Ooh. Sorry about this episode, folks. This is sort of a loose ends week where we get everything kind of out of the way, because once we start with the installation, it's like painting and stuff. We don't want to come back and rake stones around or try to move these posts and have this. And this is what you think about when you think about doing this task. But the ladder and the tripod and the array of things that were stuff that we tried and didn't need, we don't want that down here when we started insulating. So I got a little bit ahead of myself there getting the installation because I had the truck anyway and could pull the trailer and the trailer anyway from bringing the skid steer home. So that's how we ended up here. But as far as right now, we're looking for that same. The laser has moved. So our numbers from before are no longer relevant, although their relationship should be exactly the same. So if we're at 46 basically there, 46 heavy, ooh, and then right here, we're at 46 light, or 47 and 7/8, 15/16, or excuse me, 45 and 15/16, practically right on 46. Over here at this post, we're a little light. We are truly at 45 and 7/8, 45 and 13/16, which is our lowest point. Over here, in the addition, or the white ceiling, we're at 46. In the second, that was the first edition. In the second edition, we're a little light of 46. That's just on either side of the joist, where the second edition floor comes in next to the first edition floor, which all comes in over here at this place where we're trying to be. So first edition is a little heavy, 46, and the original residence is a little heavy at 46. So take a little bit of pressure off. And what did we say the worst one was over here? This is the heaviest one. And this is a little light. So to get closer to that, come down to actual 46. And then according to this new laser setup, we're inside of a 1/4 inch across the end of this peg, across from one end to the other in terms of the subfloor itself. We'll look at everything, and we'll look at the bottom surface of the beam for comparison's sake and see if you'd driven this all on the bottom surface of the beam, thinking that it would translate up through a bunch of variables, see the difference it would make. But for now, we will lift a touch, take a little out at the floor, and then, how much? 1/8 of an inch, and then we'll set it back down. It's a whole thing, guys. It's a whole thing. Okay, one more time, just for posterity. On the first edition, we're at 46. On the second edition, same area, we're at 45 and 3/4, which is something we can't help. And this is the least, lowest quality area of the place with this second and third editions. Right here at this post, which is at the old house. So in the first edition, we're at 46. And in the original house, we're at 46. And down just across the way, let's go to the ends of the old beam. In the old house, whoa, we're at 46 1/4 at this end of it. Let's go down here. And it's hard to be in the original house right now, although I guess I could be on the top edge of that new beam. Oh God, sorry guys, I got the extra battery hanging on my hand. It'll be up there. Oof. I got no laser line right here. So sorry, but old house, a little over 46. Over here on this end of the beam, on the other side of the stairway, it's at 46 and 5/16. Down here on the line, just out of curiosity, to the old house. I'm stuck on that damn electrical wire. 46 and 5/16. Ooh, this thing is heavy. Oh, old house. At this end, practically right at 46, at 16th or so. Here at this point, a little light at 46, 45 and 15/16, like we said. And right here next to this post, that's the worst one. Just a little more like 45 and 3/4, which exists somewhere else in here that I can recall. So that's going to be where we leave off with all of this. The posts are plumb. This could stand to lose a little elevation in this one, but actually I can maybe do that now if I get that wrench and that extender on there. But we ended up using that hydraulic jack. Now, why don't I use those when I use the shores? Well, you can notice that you kind of have to drag this whole stack up everywhere with you, and for each one of those jacks, you got to have all this blocking. I own probably enough to make a solid 2 towers this high, if not almost 3, between 2 and 3. Now I own enough. Well, I'm not going to keep those triple layers and stuff, but we'll keep those other cribbing blocks somewhere around for some use or another. But it's just a lot of moving materials around and everything for as handy as it is to walk away with that like it's a suitcase, the rest of the whole setup. Now, if you have a small distance that you could put that in and lift on, like we could get in the window well, saves you a bunch, something like that. But you just can't beat these for applications where you need to go, you want to go a big distance and extend them out. Would it be cool if they sold these, a tube with an engineered ledge inside that of a certain length could be added to that guy, and it would jump you up, but it would also slide over the hydraulic ram by a couple of inches and give you the side to side. That's the thing, you don't want to have all these places where something can buckle and kick out. So a lot of guys sometimes will put a vertical 6x6 on those, and I've done that before in the past at my own place and try to push straight up without the thing kicking out. But on one occasion I had something kick out under far less pressure, but still significant pressure. And it went cartwheeling out through the back window at the shop and exploded into pieces and went across the breezeway. So I didn't even see it, actually. I heard it and saw the aftermath, but it was enough for me to always consider spending the time and energy not doing it that way. So, long story short, I also kept either the column itself, at least, if not the one of the shores, in there and snugged up so that if we lose pressure or something should change or shift, we don't have very far to go before the energy turns back from kinetic to potential again, and hopefully the situation is mitigated. So now all we got to do is trundle all this crap out of here and see what, the stone, if it needs some touch up. We want to get these cables and stuff back up and out of our way, and then I'm going to get the hose pulled in, and I think I might use basically this line on this. I'll make it more permanent, but I guess there isn't a shadow here. This is one of the form lines from here. Oops, no, from here to there. This isn't a form line, unless it was. Maybe it was. But I ended up with that's where we started when we used the plumb before I bought the 3-plane laser for this project. I was thinking I kind of want to be right here. We want to be 2 inches over from that steel, so I suppose what I'll do is I'll just dangle the chalk line and snap it on this face and on this face. I think I'll probably start in here because I can believe it or not, it's handier I can get right in here and kind of put my leg up and on whatever scaffold I'm here to start the cut. Not that I want the leg underneath the saw, but basically I can back up against this wall behind me and make it easier for my body to take the shape necessary to wait on the saw, cutting its way full depth all the way from here down to the floor. And then take what we learned with that and come out here and do it. And then it's going to be 10 inches thick. And I think the full depth of cut on that wet saw is almost 5 inches, if not a little more, a little less. Anyway, we'll be close there. Close enough if we don't cut it all the way through that it can be tapped and it'll break there. But then it'll become a question. I mean, that's a big... If that thing should tip over in here, it's going to leave a big mark on the floor. And so I'd kind of like at that point... I hate to run the saw horizontally and try to cut from both sides and make pieces coming down on this whole thing. So I'm not really sure after that where we'll go. We might try that. I may just have to live with it falling over on the floor and then cutting on it down there and then just fixing up the stone when we're all done. But now's the time to get it out of here. And we're not going to bother with that down at the other side because it's part of our bathroom layout already, and it's not in anybody's way. And I think, though, that's going to be quick and easy for what it is, for what we accomplish. It's not going to be all that quick and easy, I don't think. So we won't double our work in that if we don't have to. It's too bad that some of the stuff that we're doing now is stuff that could have been basically hashed out in a drawing space in a complete and finished design from start to finish, including electrical layout and plumbing layout and HVAC layout and the radiant floor layout and exactly the geometry of the basement wall pour and the location of the egress window and what we're going to do underneath the chimney is all sort of missing or misrepresented slightly in our current drawing that's on hand at the town, because I wanted to get far enough to open a permit and get started. But a lot of the things that we chose to do, like moving over the beam for the plumbing layout itself, and whether or not I could get up and over the wall right there, these are all things that you learn in the field what you can and can't do. And almost 100% of the time when you've planned on doing something previous to that, you've got to change it significantly, which is almost as much, if not more work as there is in determining in the field just what to do and then adding that and moving forward. So that's how we chose to approach this. If it was a brand new build and we were making everything based on the drawing from start to finish, it'd be one thing. But everything's relative to the building upstairs here. And so the point of what I'm saying is it's high time for us to go through the current drawing, mark it all up with what's actually here, including cutting that pilaster back. Oh, and the point of all of that was that I would have double checked the actual cross section of the steel and the size and location of the beam pocket, and we wouldn't need such giant shimming and yada yada. So it's fine. I don't think that would have been less expensive to have worked through what we thought all the issues and plans were going to, be, and then get here in the moment. Not to mention Sean, to start with, these window locations are based on where he put his lifting beams, and so that's almost precisely why the locations of the windows in the current drawing aren't where these windows ended up, because it makes no sense to stick rigidly to those window locations and have holes like this or like those over there that need to be filled with block and anything else. We just chose to make the beam pockets into window holes that are all the same size. And so Sean's not the type of operation that's going to have a drawing of his lifting layout. He'll put it together while he's here, getting started and doing it. So, if you're going that route, or if I was going that route, I never had the ability to call everything right out exactly like that. In fact, if I have him do my house someday, and I want to be very particular about my window locations, I will ask him up front, can you look at what I've got for window locations in the plan and tell me whether or not we can put the beams through them? I'll paint them right out on the ground, and he can look at that as compared to where he wants to put his beam, and we can together on the site kind of see that there are however many that aren't going to work out, and I can accommodate that in my plan. I kind of don't like the idea of a concrete monolithic wall with block repairs here and there. It just seems like it would look like shit. And if I don't get back to it at my house, I wouldn't be able to cover those up. Now you can put tinted mortar on to dress it up, or you can put fake stone stuff on there, and then all that stuff gets lost in the shuffle. So if that's the plan, then no big deal either. But these are all things that precluded us from having a complete 100% design that made sense to pursue as a goal before we started, because so much of it would have changed that we would have cost ourselves in time to come back around, just like we're coming back around now. And so we just save that until we need to do things right now. So I guess what I'm saying, long story short, is that from an outsider or a layperson's perspective, we've made giant errors and been wasteful in the amount of concrete here, and some other small things here, like moving from 3 layers to 4 there, or anything else like that. But honestly, the amount of moving parts in a project this size, and the things that are dependent on stuff like weather and equipment rental and everything, we've, knock on wood, had a very fortunate sort of sequence of events so far. And so we are hoping to see that continue. These small changes and different things like that, aren't going to be that big of a problem in the scheme of things. And a lot of them might have cost us this much or more in a different way. Oh, I got to scoot that toilet over because of our final decision on how thick the wall is going to finally be. And I have to be 15 inches from it with the center line of the toilet. So nothing too big of a deal, but those are a couple things that I want to get done here and get everything out, and then they can get into packing and laying out insulation in here. What did Ed say? Oh, he's going to maybe do this as-built drawing too. So blah blah blah. Okay, I don't know why it wasn't recording, but I backed off and took a few hammer swings with the sledge. Now if you look up on top, you can see that we're practically a half an inch or so. When we're at the full depth that we can cut, we're about a half an inch left over between the cuts. However, although I don't think we have the likelihood of rebar being right on center still is unlikely. So I was thinking maybe we had a piece of rebar connecting us across. What I can tell you is that it doesn't like to run tipped back, whether it's not getting oil, although it's a two-stroke machine, it's a premixed fuel. Something doesn't like tipping way up. So I think I'll take the opportunity to quickly, you can turn the guard on the saw, set it back, I believe, so that more of the front can be pushed in with the saw going, being level. And must be going by outside with the Mini X doing something. What's up, bud? So anyway, it's not really budging yet, and I think it's because we're not as deep as possible for the full length of the cut, top to bottom. Obviously not at the bottom. So if I can turn that guard, I can actually cut down a little bit closer. We've got verts coming out of the footer that were cast up into the wall. So there's likely, I could look at the photographs, there's likely at least one, if not two, more likely one, rebar pin that's going to be connecting our wall pour to our footer pour. So we're going to have a little bit of a war here to get this thing to let go, but the meat and the potatoes has been cut through at this point. I'm completely soaked, and so I think what I'll do is double check that I don't have everything I need. I needed some wrenches and stuff, which I don't think I still have on site. I was working on the truck, but took stuff back to the shop. So anyway, we'll get the guard turned over and do some more cutting here. Okay, well, yesterday I was thinking I needed tools to rotate the guard. It was clocked over here, and so I'm tipping the saw up to get the full depth of cut, several circumstances here. And like I say, I didn't want to run like that, etc. I couldn't for the life of me figure out how to rotate it. We got down to the end of the day. I stopped over to Tri-County that used to rent me these before I bought my own. And he said, you just sit on top and just yank it. There's just it's enough of a friction surface, rubber or whatever in there that it'll stay wherever you put it, but you really got to put it, you got to get serious to rotate it. So I just yanked it back, and now I may have adjusted a little bit more, maybe not, but I guess once I pick it up, we're sort of able to cut into its full depth of cut as close to the floor as possible. I can cut straight in, down low, which is what we need here. It's what we need on the other side. And for good measure, I'll probably hold the saw and go straight in and go straight down to the extent that I can in here. I took a bath in that water spray yesterday. I'll probably end up doing that again today. But if we can get most of that cut through, then I may see if I can make 1, 2, maybe like 4 pieces. So 18, 20 inch tall at the most, and go sideways. Just start at the top, and that's more concrete there than it's about 2 solid mason blocks, which is a lot of weight. It's more than a full 80-pound bag. It's 100 pounds anyway, if not 125 or 30. So it's going to be hard to muscle down the ladder, but there's a chance I could put the wheelbarrow here and tip it over into the wheelbarrow, and the wheelbarrow could take it, because then I want to wheel it to the back and flop it up and out of the back window. And I'm just trying not to make a giant mess of the stone floor, which is not something that you can't fix, but regardless, let's see what we can get done here. All right, well, we're really well cut in there. I guess I don't have a flashlight. Use my headlamp, I guess. I don't know if I'm coming to the end of this blade. I forget how much concrete I cut through in the garage. But as you can see right there, we got some steel. It's really giving us some trouble. It's weirdly... It must be... Oh, I'm cutting right up the middle of a vert. That's what's going on. See, the height of the steel is remarkable. And it's because it's a vertical piece of rebar right there. Which is annoying because we do have to seal all the exposed ends of the rebar that I was thinking would be sticking out this way for code to protect against corrosion. So we may have to get this broken off and then move this cut over just a little bit, or rip that piece of rebar out or something. This will all be covered up in the finished wall of the basement, but we got to think about things like that. Across the top, we've practically come together to touch. This horizontal that I cut is in there pretty damn good. Need to kind of backlight it actually. There we go. We've cut through most of this thing, which is nice because it's 10 inches wide instead of 8, because that was another thing that we figured we needed according to the experience level of my concrete wall crew, that now I'm undoing all of their work because they don't care about whether or not that opening is practical. They care about moving quickly and getting the job done. So I think I'm gonna go grab a lunch and I'll pick up that Hilti chipping hammer. The full-blown impact, or I'll see what they have. I've got the Milwaukee 1 1/8" chipping hammer, which is a bit too small for this operation. However, that big mammoth jammer that we broke the threshold out of the overhead door, that might be a little too much. So that's a rotary hammer. I think we'll go with the chipping hammer, which is in between what I own and the other thing that I always rent. And we'll get this guy busted, at least the top broken off. Then I'll probably cut this bottom into as much or more of a piece, and then this area here where it connects up to the footer is going to be probably a special case, and we may end up slicing it up into a bunch of little pieces the way we did these notches here. And hopefully I can get through all of that without having to run out and get another $200 concrete blade, which I'd like to think I can, because it seems to be cutting just fine. There it was acting up and I couldn't imagine why, but I guess it's that steel. I mean, it really isn't for cutting steel, even though it's diamond blade. So let's see how that works when we get back. All right, it's time for maximum SDS. That's this. SDS Max. Uncle Chazzy doesn't have himself an SDS Max hammer drill or chipping hammer yet, so we borrowed one from Tri-County, and it'll be easy to work with horizontally and sort of heft up rather than the TI 1000 or whatever demo hammer or rotary hammer. This can be set to just hammer. We got a shallow angle tip and a deep angle tip and a little chisel do. And so my intention is to drive those in right along on both sides until we get something to break away. Because of course trying to pivot it back and forth here is trying to shear that little remaining concrete there. And so we haven't necessarily, and then trying to pivot it back and forth all the way down, we're working against the entire base of it, cast up and under the weight of it, formed and potentially chemically bonded to some degree to that footer. And so we haven't got all the degrees of freedom that you might think. Blasting it from the side with a hammer is, working out there so I'll be working out at the outer edges where we stop having physical support and trying to work in the first foot or so of this crack on both sides and this crack on both sides to get this thing to break about the innermost area here. And then we'll have to see what kind of situation it is to tip it out and let it hit the floor. I don't want it to hit this stuff. I don't know. We'll see. I don't know. Maybe I'll cut this thing again. Maybe I'll do that. Cut this in half one time and just, because that's going to be enough. And if I make this whole thing loose and try to tip it out of there, I mean, that's over 100 pounds worth of concrete. It's just going to be destructive and dangerous. So yeah. Okay, so I can see that we got to cut that vert. That's like the only thing that's holding this, is coming, because it's not plumb. The cut is basically plumb, but that vert comes from in here and goes out and went into this piece. And so I was slicing into it here and it was bucking the saw back before I went out for lunch. I'm going to reach in here with the Sawzall now with a carbide heavy metal cutting blade on it, because I can finally get in there, and then we can watch that from being backed off, and that top will let go and hit the floor, and then that rebar becomes part of this side on the left. So the bottom right two pieces after that they've either got their own piece of rebar, which I don't see. Is my headlight on here? I don't see another rebar in there, like right in on board. So I think cutting that one free, the top will fall, and then the bottom two will actually be far easier. If I can get the second one up out of the way, the bottom one needs work, down in there, and to get it to separate from the floor, but that's my tack right now. Heck yeah. That went pretty smooth. All I had to do was let go of that one steel rebar vert that was thankfully kind of out of plumb. If he'd have been real plumb, there wouldn't have been any issues here. I could have cut it free, popped it, just levered on a little bit like I was trying to, and it would have collapsed over like that. I was hoping that there wasn't even a rebar pin coming up from the footer, which there isn't. So we had a real easy time of cleaning them off the footer. Had a couple little pieces here at the inside corner that'll allow the foam to sit squarely in there, and then at some point we'll come back and we'll put a sole plate on, and we'll plumb a wall up in here, which will probably leave a little bit of a gap if we choose to finish into there. If we choose to fly right by with the finished wall and put a doorway into it, then we'll take off of that wall and probably bother to go around the corner. It won't be worth going straight here and losing 6 or 8 inches of space in this room, so we'll go around the corner in here. But that's all down the road. I got most of everything picked up and set up into window holes, so the stuff that goes into the garage, the stuff that goes up and around into the workshop, the ladders and stuff, I'll get them moved out. I'm torn on whether I want to get the floor in, because the foam will go over, and then the mason will be here doing the windows, and I was thinking I would set this stuff up and take a little tension off and slide that stuff out and have him install solid block with mortar and do it on that end. And I was thinking I won't mind with a cured floor sitting on top of the footer, but I'm going to have 2 inches of styrofoam between the two. And while that has no problem with the weight of the floor pad itself, pushing on the edge of the floor on styrofoam, you kind of want to engineer a big enough foot to relieve the pressure and hope that you don't break the side of that, crack the floor. I feel terrible if we put that off and we crack the floor. So, and not to mention those blocks are all down in the basement right now. So there's a chance that I would stack stuff up and lift and install that myself with a little bit of mortar. I don't think it's too difficult to mix mortar correctly. I've certainly done a bunch of it. I said over here that I wasn't going to build all of that because it's actually kind of a lot more complicated. But I could carefully cut a solid block See, the thing is, do you cut a solid block that just fits in there perfectly? Or, you know, because the wood squishes onto that rough, this surface is rough and uneven here. So you really kind of need to make it 1/2 inch or more too small, and then bed it into grout overnight at least, or whatever, or mortar, I mean, and then put the pressure on it and then turn around and do the other side. So there's a little bit of that I might feel a lot better about doing before we're pushing on foam. And of course I got to swing that toilet flange over, which I think there might be time enough to do today. So I'm going to go up and set this stuff all back where it goes, and then I'll probably hand dig out around the toilet flange and see if I can move him away from the wall more as a product of putting a 22.5 degree bend somewhere in line. I don't know if I want to figure that out. Sometimes I do something like that in CAD quick so I can just make the pieces appropriately and glue it all back up and have what I want. But we'll just see. Alright, quickly while I'm at the computer, I said I'd be using CAD to figure out how to move my toilet orifice over from the wall a precise amount based on adding 22.5 angle, actually I ended up doing. So we look quickly at my diagram. I just put in a line here to designate the surface of the concrete. I moved it over, or offset 1.25 inches to establish the EPS foam. We got a 3.5 inch scenario here for the thickness of the 2x4. We got my matrix screensaver. We got a 1/2 inch for whatever we're going to put on the wall when we call it finished. And we need to be 15 inches to the center line of that toilet from the finished wall. And so this circle over on the left is where we are currently. And so I can do things like I can stick a circle where we are now. I can stick a circle where we want to be. I could draw in the overall hub from above. We're looking at 22.5 degree 4-inch fitting. And obviously this is a little bit, the details on the outside of this are based on being able to easily injection mold it. So I just worried about putting in the hub end and it's engaged. So the hub is in solid lines, the engagement of the pipe is the dotted line. Over here, hub end is in solid. This is the engagement on the pipe there. And at 22.5 inches, that's set to come on too often. 22.5 inches, or 22.5 degrees from this location, our intersection is here, which locks the fitting up and down the axis of the current line of pipe, locks it into that location. But if you look at the original orifice, it's on a long sweep elbow, so that comes over and the dotted line here. That's the hub end of that elbow as it connects up now. And so if you just imagine this elbow from above and you swing him over to here, obviously this hub has to pivot, and we're pretty obviously it's almost 100% in the hub end of this fitting, so it's not going to work, right? So I need to basically see if a street elbow is going to work. So I need an elbow that points up here and goes directly into a street situation, which means it goes right into a hub. And so the deepest engagement line of this 22.5 degree fitting to the center line of that elbow has to be at least 3.78, which is, I don't know, 7/8 of an inch, or is 5/8 is 625, so 7/8 or 3/4 is 7.5, so a little over, yeah, we're closer to 7/8 of an inch here, 13 or 15/16 or something like that of an inch, because so long as it's less than that, we can add a little sliver of, oh no, we can't add a sliver of pipe in a street scenario. So we're going to have a real tough time here unless I go over to McMaster Carr and I just check. This is a street elbow. See how that end goes into a hub and this end is a hub. And I can see that we're almost looking at it here, right the way that I'm looking at it over here. And so our center to end, now this is all engagement, is 5 5/8 of an inch. And over here, the whole thing is going to come in a little shy of fully engaged. So I can live with that. So if we scoot this in 1/8 of an inch further, then, you know, we're a little bit near the wall. That's all well within tolerance. I'm very lucky, basically. Suffice to say, we're real lucky here. So now all I got to do is figure out where this engagement line, this is the engagement of the top of this piece. And so how far from our current center line to that engagement line is the question on where to cut that thing off right now. So I can quickly, and this is the beauty of the CAD, I can go from the center line that we want to have, or that we have got, to this engagement line. I could pull that out. I guess I've already got it. It's on here somewhere. But it's 7.242, which is close enough to 7.25. So 7¼ inches, or I know that, in fact, it's 3 inches according to the fitting from the outside of the hub to the end. More importantly, because it's hard to get to the center of a negative space. So I know it's 3 inches from the outside surface of the elbow to the face of it here. So if I need, you know, in fact, I could just do how far from here to the current face of the current fitting. We'll accept that as well. So that's 1.74. So that's 1 3/4 heavy, 1 13/16 or something like that. Is all the further away from that fitting I need to cut this off. And then I can glue this guy on, and I could put a street elbow into it, and I could be back on where I need to be over there, which is quite the easy fix. All I gotta do is shove a little stone out of the way, and we're in good shape there. What else is going on this week? Because I wasn't sure whether or not to cap the video last week at the end of cutting that pilaster down, because so we've currently, this is a real old print, doesn't even show being able to get in there, but we cut that pilaster back from about here to over there, and we moved these post locations around. So I got to have the architect confirm that those, this is the updated number, so we got to confirm that those spans are acceptable. The egress window is no longer here, it's over there. And so the town wants to see a far more structurally accurate set of plans from us, and they want to see our insulation cross section, which we've decided on now. And then we've got another issue, because in cross section in this area where we are we cut back the pilaster and we're under the beam, that beam needs to be lifted up just enough to take those layers of LVL out, and I need to install a concrete block with mortar that appropriately locates the end of the beam in terms of elevation, but is all mason material and solid and won't be subject to degrading over time. So if we were to put our jack in place and plate across and go all the way to the concrete floor that's in there at that point in the future with our 24-inch square cribbing base, and we're on that 4,500 psi concrete with XPS foam on the edges. Ooh, I showed that incorrectly. That's going to be like this. Derp. So we're going to come in and install. These are the pieces that we made on the bandsaw. So basically the concrete is cantilevering out in space on 180 degrees all the way around this thing over this foam. And we need to know if what we're loading the jack with to take enough weight off just to sneak what we've got out and sneak something back in there. If we risk, if there's any concern, breaking or cracking around the footprint of this thing because we're squishing the 2-inch R10 XPS down. In which case, I want to put this whole arrangement on the actual footer and the stone and get this done beforehand. But see, I wanted to wait until the floor was in, because then the mason's coming to put all of our windows in. Since we won't need those raw openings in the side of the foundation to come and go for the work of pouring the floor. And then he'll have mortar going, and he'll be able to do a professional job of working around me getting these in place and stuff. Probably once being ready for him in the morning to install the one, and then at some point through the day, hopefully being able to load it and get set up on the other one and have that put in place before the end of the day, and then come back the next day and load that side as well. Something like that. Simple thing. Takes all kinds of peripheral work to get it done. So I ran this by the architect. I gave him the information that I figured he would need to let me know whether that's a risk. And so we may need to do this before we even put the foam down. And we won't even put this XPS on the wall in that location. We won't attach it there until we're done. So we got the foam sliced up in the shop. Ed is going to take that down tomorrow. And so we're just kind of piecemeal here. I'm not sure which video this is going to end up in, I guess. But that's what's going on with this. Alright, pay no attention to this foam stuff happening in the background, folks. We've got the cribbing set up for lifting that we use throughout the middle of the place. But I did ask the architect about pushing on the floor, and I'm going to blather about this also in the installation video next, because I am actually working on it right now. I'm going to lift the beam and replace this wood shimming with concrete and mortar, solid block and mortar, as I've been talking about over and over in this series. I did ask the architect if I could push on the finished concrete floor on the styrofoam, but without him doing the calculations and getting right back to me, which he hasn't done yet, I know that it's safe enough to do as we sit here, and I'm just trying to avoid making a little monolithic block and making a little bit of mortar and putting it in place and yada yada. But really it's come down to the fact that if that was done and I was not trying to be here anymore, well, we could get this foam laid out. And so that's what I'm trying to do for the next video. So the end of this loose ends is going to be replacing the shims under the ends of the beam and moving this toilet flange over, which we were looking at my desk. And as we said there, if I get a for some reason fits really loosely, I don't know why, but if I get a street elbow and I put it into a 22.5 degree fitting, and I cut that pipe back an 1 3/4 approximately from the face of that hub, I'll be back there, and thereby, without the camera parallax, we'll move the center line from the wall just the amount that we need. So I need to just do a little excavation there. Oh, and then I'll put a 4-inch notch in the sidewall of this thing so it'll saddle down and around, and we'll get it centered over that new location, which will be over here, but it'll sit all the way down to where the bottom edge is on the bottom of the 4-inch line, just giving it enough, choking it enough with enough stone so that it's not wangling all around, and it'll sit kind of vertically, and that'll be how we hold back the concrete pour. We'll fit the styrofoam to that, and then later when we come back to finish this area and put the toilet flange down at the surface of the floor, I can make up some mortar and basically grout in place. So we could put in some pipe and glue it, and then mortar around it, and let that set up, or vice versa. But anyway, we can get the pipe cut and sized correctly so that essentially the flange lands right on the surface of the concrete floor, or the grout at that point, but it'll be stricken off flush with the concrete floor. It'll work out real nice. Ooh, the architect's calling me. Let's see what he has to say. Alright, I forget because I was in the middle of this thing right along, but you've really got to take 10 or 12 feet of completely loaded beam up a touch before you can free up a post. Whereas here, I've just got to depart the plate a tiny bit, and where that amount kind of off of that block and it's loose. The rest of this can stay kind of loaded onto the foundation. It's a different scenario here, so not to mention this is a really robust jack, so it took hardly anything to just pump up. It's cool watching the time lapse. You can sort of see how much collateral squish there is in the cribbing stack just to go up in reality. And there's just a tiny amount in everything here, and you multiply that, or at least add it all together. Whereas when you have a lifting shore, which is why I use the shores almost always, I've said this already, but lugging all the blocks in and lugging all the blocks around and moving them all around in here, yada, 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 it is nice to have a hydraulic jack's power rather than walking all around cranking those things up. But in the end, they're steel from one end to the other, and when they go up, when they get longer, something is going up. There's no squishing in them. Not to mention you can move them around in one unit, and everywhere you go, you've got the height that you need if you've got some that are sized correctly. Closer and closer I get to buying the heavy-duty versions of mine that would be the right length and have the right power to do what we needed to do down here. I almost broke the one asking too much of it down here, so again, those that I've got were the first ones I ever bought, and they've done a lot. They made me a lot of money. But if I did it all over again, I'd double down on their strength for not quite double the cost. And so now it'll be much more than double the cost, obviously, to get set up with a set that are heavy duty now as well in addition. But that's just something to consider here. Now, the weight's off, I got the shim out, I blew out the debris. It isn't a terribly square hole, but that's okay. We're gonna basically bed. I was going to use the blocks to roughly size the piece of concrete that I need, which, I can't come in from the side. I'm going to have to slide it in from the end, unless it's truly, I probably measure up here as well. I'll probably do something a little shy of being able to add from the side into a bed of mortar, because it's just far less travel over the mortar rather than in from the end, and will allow the mortar to be what takes up the difference between a square monolith and this weird shape. But that means we want to get the top as tight to here as possible. I opened up an air gap, so if we set the top tight to this, we ought to be where we wanted, or a little higher. If anything, we want to make this wet. We want this surface to be nice and smooth, so we're not point loading it, for better or worse. I thought about cutting what I need off of these concrete, off of this pilaster top. You know what I could do? This is the actual top surface of it, which is relatively flat, but it would work facing down into the mortar and really bite if I can do a careful job of slicing the top off from all the way around with the wet saw. And that piece should work down there as well, because it'll be the difference of a little bit thicker or thinner mortar. And there's plenty here. If I cut it one time carefully all the way around, that'll be what I try to do. Let's see how that goes. All right, if I'm completely honest, this is the sort of thing that really chaps my ass. Whoa, between that and falling down a ladder. I hate how this pocket turned out. I hate that to set a piece back, it's in there at an angle. It's just, and then we're gonna be all mortar. it'll be fine. It'll do what it needs to do, and in the end you won't ever see it because we're going to finish around in here. It's just one of those things that irks the living shit out of me, that it could have just been so much cleaner. But I wasn't able to do the parts of this project that resulted in these discrepancies myself, and so we got most of what I needed out of somebody else without it being too big of a deal. I've avoided doing this just because for several reasons, but let's get some mortar made up. We'll put it in there. We're also going to throw the extra mortar in that cavity, and we've got a little cavity over here, which goes to show you that vibratory tool that they were using all over in here, particularly in the window, underneath the window openings that have got no open top. It's just important. That's a testament to having used that thing all over the place. I think those two areas are excusably deep, and you end up with that situation, which in the end isn't a big structural concern at that size and frequency or whatever, but we were trying to avoid those throughout by using that vibratory tool from the first, I don't know, episode 8, 10, 12, somewhere of the series. When we're pouring the concrete, you can see them using that thing. So I guess I'll make a dab of mortar up and set that block in. Do my best to send the smooth top up tightly to the bottom of the beam and finish all around with that. Throw the extra in those openings there, and then we'll probably busy ourselves with that toilet relocation. And if that thing's set up tomorrow, then we'll come and do the same thing over there. Okay, we got a little bit of mortar, just kind of making those look better. It's not really contributing a lot of extra strength, but it won't hurt to put the leftover mortar in there. I built this sort of pedestal up. I moistened that. I'm just letting that tighten up because it's a little gelatinous. No matter how tight or dry I try to make the batch, it's so delicate. A touch more water and it's too sloppy, a touch less and it's too dry and grainy, and I'm not a mason, so I want to do my best work regardless. So we're gonna let that tighten up. This got water into it from firing the hose, try to moisten those areas. It didn't look like that when I was mixing, but now that will definitely be too wet, so I'll just leave that in the pan for now. I'm gonna set up and excavate this out and make sure that it all fits up the way that I want, and then glue it like that to this extent where to the elbow, and leave the vertical to be glued later. And while I'm at it, I'll make the concrete sonotube fit around it and bed it all back into stone, so that's sort of ready to fit this foam against. And then we'll go back and look and see if that's tightened up enough to place that block onto it. The less movement and jostling that you can do, the better. So get the block slid in, get the sides blended well enough, and then just leave it overnight and come back and put that weight back on it tomorrow. Which, again, if anything, there's very little weight on this beam over here because so much is on the foundation wall, and then you've got floorboards that reach out in here and start bridging between this post holding up these joists and those floorboards coming over to the rim joist, and then you've got weight off of these joists actually on the floorboards, or being kind of held up by the floorboard. And then we get over here, so there's not an incredible amount of point load on that particular area, although we obviously want something under it. So loading it again shouldn't be catastrophic, but I want to put my best foot forward. So we'll set you up here by this situation over here, and we'll get this done while we wait. Alright, that suits me for right now. If I get the flange just setting in there, then it's easier to look at the distance from it to this cardboard all the way around and see that we're relatively centered there. That'll be to the extent to which I need to fill with mortar. That can also be called grout at a certain point, or to grout something in the field. Depends on what exactly you're talking about, but we'll use mortar to do it. Like I said, I got those patched. I think now I'll see if I can't get that block. I don't want to bring a lot of water. I want him to be moist, but I don't want to bring any liquid water with, because that's just going to mess up the overall dryness that I was going for. In the end, oh, there was a place there that I fixed up as well. Just trying to use up that extra mortar. Whoa, there's no ledge there, Chezzy. Okay. So again, this is looking tighter overall, but spongy inside here. See that gelatinousness, and that it knocks it off out here at the edges. So I'm looking for this kind of consistency, that the more I touch it, the softer it'll get, the more you jostle it, and the more it'll melt. So I gotta wait a little more to sneak that block in place. And there isn't much else, to do other than putting the foam up while I wait. So I'll start shoot some of that on, I guess, but that's not going to be in this video. Sorry. Alright, I ran and got a couple things at the further hardware store. I had the fan on it over here, and we're getting to a point here where that's still malleable and not crumbling, not trying to exist as a shape, a solid shape, and then moving, but still all the little component pieces are the body of it wants to morph, basically. I don't know if that's a good enough explanation, but what am I looking for? Oh, the block itself. Instead of, it's more like clay still. It's a modeling kind of a consistency. The piece is here and still moistened. So I'll set up the tripod, I guess, and see if we can't get this thing installed. Toolage. Swing. Come down a little bit. Place. That tapped over and get this worked up to it. Just getting this Same thing around the world. Oh no! Put you actually in the tripod this time. Come on. Safety seat is only as good as the seat belt that holds it or something there. Okay. Just trying to get... Not sure what the problem is there, but gotta happen right now when I need 6 hands. Woo. We'll just get this side pared back so that we're sure that we don't. There. Need video of me doing this around the corner from myself, from the ladder. I don't know why I always put myself in these situations physically rather than just taking a second to it's flush at the back and shy at the front, but the front butt at this point suits me. And we've got, whoa, hey-ho, we've got a tiny gap there. It's about, I don't know, 1/8 of it, not even, 3/16. Maybe it's an 1/8 at the back. Anyway, at the front it's tighter. Anyway, I'm overly high, so know what I'm saying. But when I come back down to this, as long as it doesn't go down tomorrow, we should be right where we want to be with that scenario. And then we'll copy our work down at the other end. What else was I going to say? That's basically it. I took a little time with the fan, pointed at it like I said. I might have been here 5-10 minutes prior, 15 minutes earlier than now. Would have maybe been a little bit better in terms of the consistency, but it's still functional there. I didn't want to overhandle it at all, so I was able to do what I wanted without much trouble. Then I ended up, the time I spent waiting for that to become the consistency, I ran and got these 3/16, which is sort of the smallest, at least Tapcon brand, the fairest of them all, and they only went up to 2 3/4 at Lowe's, which leads me to believe you don't get, I don't know, they might offer longer. Anyway, it ought to do what we needed to do, and I had to get another bag of these Spax washer things, insulation washer things. This isn't quite what we need here, I don't think, so I got another 25. That's the smallest pack, so I know that even if I just need the one more, I won't be kicking myself for buying twice as, or 2 of the same big pack. I don't know what occurred to this one piece of foam. I saw this. It's hidden in the stack. It's got those body lines on it. Anyway, we're not looking at any of the foam or insulation right now because we're wrapping up the loose ends video. And yes, I'm going to set up and do the same thing down here on this episode as well before I wrap her up. So just hang in there. Another quick little thing I want to mention here is, like, for example, notice how this little piece, now everything's glued up to this elbow, but that piece of pipe isn't glued in and the rest of that is all dry fit. And notice how the fitting is above the plane of the floor. Notice over there that the fitting is down into the plane of the floor. Basically, I want to take this stuff apart, set it aside, and probably put like a 2-foot stick of 3-inch pipe into that. Again, glue it in. 2 feet just to stay right up and out of our way, no problem. Or maybe if I got to scrap a little shorter, but about that much, so that I have plenty sticking up when we're all done. And glue it down into that elbow. And then attach it to the wall with Tapcons and plumber's tape or whatever. Make sure that it's plumb side to side, and pack something behind it or remove stuff or whatever to make sure it's plumb the other way, and lock it up there glued into the elbow. Same over here. 2 feet, a 4-inch, take the rest away for now. Lock it up side to side plumb and in and out plumb and glue it in there. And then we'll cast up the concrete floor around it, and then later I can cut it off at whatever height. I think I'm going to end up going in with the washing machine first, because that needs enough vertical piping in the line so that the machine has enough fall over and out. And so the higher we go with the horizontal, the less vertical there is to where the machine kicks the water out. So I need to remember to flip these, whatever. But anyway, holding those verticals plumb, and when we get down to fitting the foam around this, I may actually grab this thing and run over to the wall to control plumb like this. And then to control plumb side to side, I may take one angle and go over to the wall or some other thing to control it so that it can be worked around without knocking it out of plumb. Just never hurts to keep things nice and straight and plumb because that's the way that we imagine them to be. And then sometimes when they're out a little bit, it actually plays kind of a lot of hell with things. So we'll control that. And in the end, it should probably be, we should do the same with the shower. Although since it's so far out into the room, it becomes unhandy to work around whatever sticks and stuff that you may use. But I could, yeah, we'll see how that plays out. There's something else I wanted to luckily ended up over here. I guess he probably wouldn't put it in the first block anyway, but that clean out's going to end up, right above the floor. And then we'll use one of those light duty plastic access panels that are painted to match a wall. That will be what's in the finished wall over there, and one of the smaller ones right over that clean out, and right over this clean out in the finished framed wall, right in the dry wall, so they can again be painted in to match. But if you've got to, for whatever reason, snake that, you can pop them right out, and they'll prompt somebody to check, what's in there, rather than leaving them behind the drywall to be. I was thinking just leave them until you need them, and then cut in the access point. If you never need them, then you never have to deal with the access. But probably for a best practice, better put that in. Over there, I threw a blob of mortar at the wall just to see that I had what I wanted for attachment. Make sure it's bonded and sticky enough. So it ought to pop right off. Just noticing it now. So it's breaking up, but yeah, it's well stuck on there for right now. That's good. All right, back to the shop. Let's go see how things are doing down here. It's been, let's see, last night, the end of the day, was 24 hours. And so that's another 12 from midnight. So we've had another, we're coming up on 40 hours here. 42 hours or so. So I feel as though we can set this back down, come what may. So join me, folks, as we get that much done. Full speed ahead. Full camera speed rolling. Try to control this with your left hand so it doesn't slam. Maybe we should get you, let's go to that much trouble too. We'll leave that thing there. Get you buckled into your safety belt. Buckled into your safety belt. Little song I wrote back in 2023 about wasting time doing things I should have done before I started rolling the camera. All right, what does it look like when we do this? We taking the pressure off? Yes? No? Maybe? Yeah. Huh. I must be touching just enough somewhere there, which is sort of the problem, quote unquote, with this method. It's going to be just fine, but it'll be, because this is a ultra rigid material, the one tiny point that resists you, that you slide against, and that justifies the position of this block as you pack up with mortar. If it's still touching when this mortar cures up, well, then that's the point. That's the area that will be point loaded rather than. But I mean, it's going to be like that no matter what you do here to try and cast concrete smooth enough. One little bump will do the same thing when you come to set the steel down onto it. So really, nothing that much different. We got a little nodule here that works as a little, like, I don't know, little positive stop to keep it from sliding out of there, as if there's any kind of reason that it wants to, which there is not. So we are in it to win it there. Then all we got to do is drag all that cribbing down here and get that into position here on around noon. And then we'll give it to end of day tomorrow to cure up, or the last few hours of tomorrow. if we haven't gotten styrofoam all the way to here and are sitting here waiting to move that cribbing to keep going with it. If we're feeling the pressure, we're feeling the pressure. But there's a fair amount of stuff left to do. Got to get these pipes, like we were talking about, stuck to the a piece glued in and stuck to the wall perfectly plumb. And that'll take a little doing because I don't have any plumber's tape on site. So I don't like to get ahead of myself here. Let's get set up and move that cribbing, baby. Here's a problem I just realized. If we're trying to be, centered underneath that beam, we're going to have a problem here. We can obviously start with our first blocks and may have done to try and get, well, I guess it's one or the other on the footer there, two ends or one whole side of it. So we'll start that way. And then maybe justify this block over and get some other blocks in just for the same thickness to get stacked up and around that. So we may have some blocks hanging out into space. As soon as we're past it, I don't want to wrestle it all out of there because then I got to go back and mess around with the stone and get it all driven back down in and around that. If I get irritated after 1 or 2 seconds, I will just do that because I suppose it's totally doable. I just have had enough of this loose ends video. I'm sure it'll have 22 and a half views by the time I get it uploaded, and that's where it'll max out because it's just as frustrated as some people are with, all right, already, enough of these little things. These are all the things that if somebody's trying to do this for themselves, which a pretty savvy person trying to do something pretty similar to this with this series ought to be in really good shape. And I think when we get done, I'm going to break down the costs, the general costs, and getting different aspects done, and where the major pitfalls and stuff were from the perspective of looking in retrospect. But for now, I realize it's annoying to watch all these little steps, but they're all, in fact, I have cut out the majority of the little steps because they are just massively pedantic or whatever, or they're minutia. But I don't like to miss a particular thing entirely, even if I don't delve into all the aspects of doing it. So there's been a lot of aspects of these loose ends too, not the least of which is getting a hand to get the chunks of concrete out that are still laying down there. They're immediately in our way. After I move this cribbing, we could practically fill all the way to this vertical before we had any kind of problems where we even had to stop and glue that in or anything else. Almost half of this great room could be done with styrofoam kind of immediately if Ed was kicking around and interested in doing something. So since it's just me, no worries. But basically, I've got to come up with a solution to move those. I don't want to ask Ed to do that. And normally, if I get a helper, it's for the day because they have their own things going on and they can't just pop in for an hour. So we may have to scrape together some helper work, or we may get over to the deck that needs to get stained across town and touch that bad boy up for the day and end up just popping over here for half an hour to get the concrete moved out as part of that. So blah blah blah, nothing you should care that much about. Let's get this cribbing moved over here, I guess. there you have it. So I will blast this debris out with air and make up a different size block. I do some measuring around, but I guess I'll leave you here, and then when I'm ready to do something, I'll come back. I think I can work here like that. I'll be back after I get everything kind of ready, as soon as I hit the stop button. There you go. I got mortar over and behind there, so we've got essentially a fully packed cavity that's, you know, the elevation of the bottom surface has been raised, both in the majority in the concrete block, the rest of it in mortar. I got the stuff rinsed off, the toolage. Yeah, I've got a hawk and I've got different other trowels and all kinds of stuff. I'm just trying not to make, this is all, not to put too fine of a point on it, but just the irritating stuff that you have to do. It's always when the customers are bouncing off the walls about how long things have been taking. And so how you have to just stay committed to the fact that these are the steps that you have to get right, so you don't have a problem like, oh, we can't push on the floor, we're going to end up breaking it, so now what do we do about that? Or, oh, we didn't set the foam to level, so then the floor was screeded to it, or it can't be screeded to it. So there's that extra time and effort, and then there's a cavity down behind, whatever, like it just spirals out of control. We want the floor pour to go smoothly, and we want it to be in the right place, and everything that it locks in to be in the right place, plumb, level, and square. We don't want to wait stupidly until after we've got it to do tasks that could be done before. We've wanted to get stuff so that we're ready for it, since we thought we'd be ready to put it down right away, but then we weren't. Now we got to poke it back outside to make room here, and then bring it back inside. And if I was running this project, no matter how expensive it's, you know, for somebody else, no matter how expensive it ends up being, it should probably even be a 10% more expensive after that for creature comforts like a shipping container or some other such thing that everything could, you know, be stored in preparation to be used, so we're not tripping over it in the house. That's one of the first things that you can get rid of when you're trying to really squeeze a budget. But this is where it makes a difference. I've got to clean all my tools out, but I've got to move all this stuff out of here to start the next operations, and it has to stay out of here. And so I wasn't sure whether or not we were going to put the styrofoam on the walls before or after the floor, but now I'm fairly sure we're going to do it after the floor, because I want them to have more of a ledge to screed, and tools and people and stuff in and out of the windows. It's just going to be ripped up, and every time you rip this up, you have the beads, the white beads and chunks of it like that stuff right there, laying all around, getting mixed into the top of the concrete, leaving a void, something unsightly, because it's floating around on a breeze. So like not adding that to the process, but thereby it's taking more time to get absolutely ready. All right, that's curing up. Like I say, we'll give it till tomorrow's Friday, and it's a little afternoon now, so we'll give it to the middle of the afternoon tomorrow, or whenever we start feeling the pressure. But I want to get this foam kind of all the way across the floor in here by the end of tomorrow, so that I can kind of wrap up that insulation video too, which would be sweet, because that's not what this is about. This is the end of the loose ends video. Not quite there, not quite there, not quite yet. Hang in there. Okay, I was glad to think of cutting that down and making that opening larger and everything all before we're trying to work on top of the finished concrete for a variety of reasons. However, I might have waited on plate compacting until I was done making a mess of the stone, which has all been sort of fluffed and churned up there. It's happened in a few other spots. It's happened around where we made the change to the toilet flange, and I've hopped in and out of this window a bunch over here to the extent that I realize it's probably very compacted. However, when you scoot around here with the plate compactor for the first time again here, you'll see the mark that it leaves, which is to say it's just jostling everything down and making a rolling plane rather than a bunch of individually oriented stones that may or may not, be a high point across a lot of area under the foam. And then there's just a lot of crunching and crinkling, potentially cracking and breaking of the foam when you're walking around. It's not lying coplanar, edge to edge, and it gets to be tricky. You gotta get in here and walk on all of that with other stuff on top of it when you're installing the concrete. So we're gonna plate compact everything once again. We're gonna do it for a half-day rental. So we're gonna wait until this is right out of here and move the foam to just outside the door. It's been good to have it, and it's been good that it was inside all this time, but setting it just outside there to be queued it up to bring sheets in or whatever will be worth it, so that we can get the whole thing plate compacted one last time so it's fresh, and then we'll start right away and come right across the space. That area is 47 inches deep or so we're going to start with full sheets and go right across and just use full sheets all the way down to the other end until we have some custom rips to do, probably against this back wall and that one there. And then we know that a 4x4, one half of a sheet will be more than enough to create the piece that needs to go inside that alcove when we get to it. I don't want to get stuck on that, but it's all going to have to wait till toward the end of the day tomorrow. I can get that pressure off, and then that'll be all the time in the day to get that stuff loaded up and out of here. So that's going to wrap up this video. We'll get that, and then that'll get me to the end of the week as well. Oh, another thing I can do before that's quite ready, I can get a little, maybe an hour or two tomorrow, just gluing in, like we said, a piece of pipe here. And I guess once that cribbing comes down, I can be set up and ready with that stuff to get that piece of pipe glued in and fastened and plumbed up. And then that's the end of loose ends. And we can get the rest of the installation video and then throw that up right afterwards. Hang in there, guys. Hang in there. Okay, Ed's getting us compacted out again, which looks way better than it was looking before. Then we'll get this foam moved into the area over here. Then we can start laying foam out, which means we're practically at the end of this loose ends video. Thanks everybody for bearing with me. Thanks to my customers for bearing with me. Everybody always feels like these are delays or some kind of, it's frustrating. I'm even frustrated because, partly because the nature of the things are frustrating, small little niggling details. And the other problem is that it happens at the point in the project when people are really hungry for big, remarkable progress visually, like forming and pouring the wall was, or any of these other big things. But this stuff's important, and if you don't get it right or you don't get it done and you commit to concrete on top of it, the amount of work it is to undo and redo or work with what you've got and the quality of the final product when you're all done can all suffer enormously. So there you have it. Back on track now. Stay tuned for that insulation video because it's obviously coming up real soon. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you.